before I start showing you the machine, I just want to give people out there that might not be familiar with our company a little bit of a background. Lamb Knitting's been in business since 1867. The name Lamb came from Isaac Lamb, who developed a patent for the flatbed knitting machine. And that's what Lamb Knitting originally was known for, was the flatbed knitting machine. 4 businessmen in the Western Massachusetts area bought that patent and started Lamb Knitting Machine Corporation. It changed hands maybe 2 or 3 times before it got to my grandfather, who acquired the business in somewhere around 1950s. And my father and my uncle now are the owners. My aunt is the office manager, and I am the only 3rd generation engineer that joined the business. So my dad re-engineered the Tuttle and introduced it on our 150th anniversary of business. So in year 2017, the late Barry Travis lent us his Tuttle, and my dad literally took it apart piece by piece and reverse engineered it. Of course, we added some things that we think are improvements, and we'll show you what we've done and how it's different than the Tuttle and how it's different than pretty much a lot of other circular sock knitting machines. But before I show you that, I want to show you some other stuff that we're known for, and the other stuff that has been keeping us very busy these last few months. So we're going to walk now. Hopefully it's not too choppy. So this machine right here is called the St3 Machine. Can you lower it down? So this machine is more commonly used to knit things like shoelaces, drawstring cord, the handles on decorative gift bags, but pretty much all the concepts are the same. It's just a really tiny cylinder. This one has 16 needles, and it operates just like, well, kind of like a circular sock knitting machine. It has latch needles. The needles go up, it grabs yarn, and it pulls it down, draws a stitch. So the reason we've been busy is this particular machine is set up to knit elastic cord, and the elastic cord is going on medical masks. I'm going to turn it on just so you can see how it runs. It's going to be a little loud. So the cord is coming out of the takedown roll, and this is the original piece of equipment we developed for this particular customer. This is what's called a surface drive roll-up. And the cord is being guided to this little pigtail, and has its own independent motor. And this traverse unit is doing like a basket weave roll of this elastic cord. So a lot of machines that we make, even our standard machines like the string machine, St3 Machine, and our wire knitters, no two are the same. Almost every customer has their own personal preference of how they want to wind the cord, or you know, different detectors or attachments that they want on their machine. So it's very unusual that we get you know, an order for 1 or 2 that are the same. But because of, you know, this current healthcare crisis, we've actually gotten quite a few of these orders in the last few months. We're shipping 5 next week. Actually, we're shipping 8 next week, and we have 20 more on order, and we already shipped 10 a few weeks ago. So it's crazy right now. I like it, but you know, too bad it's not under better circumstances. But so to show you some other parts that we make, we have some of our customers are medical customers, and they typically, medical customers knit very, very high density material. So this is a cylinder with 55 needles per inch. There's literally 0.018 inches between adjacent needles. I don't know if you can see that very well, but the material that's knit on this is less than the diameter of one hair on your head. And the finished product usually goes in the body, usually some sort of cardiac stent material. A lot of times they don't like to tell us exactly how it's used, but right next to it actually is some cylinder blanks for the LT150. We turn these on our lathe. There's many processes that happen to it after this. A lot of machine work goes on the bottom to help engage and disengage the cylinder rotation on the LT150. We slot the cylinders here. This is a finished cylinder, so it shows the final work that we do. These little flippers here, this is what engages and disengages the cylinder with the drive gear on the LT. Okay, so we're gonna head back over to the LT.
Okay, I'm disengaging and the tripod's gonna work now.
Yeah, so hopefully
Might be
it'll
better.
a little bit more stable.
Okay, you do what you need.
Okay.
Hey, Amy Lonczak,
Yes. Yes.
if you, any other computers you have in that room that are all online, if you can get them off the internet, it might help your.
Yes. Yeah, we're gonna. I think we should disconnect that one.
How you doing, Andy?
Pretty good there, Jim. I'll say hello. Oh, you can't see me yet.
Smiling face.
How's that?
Hey, another old guy with a beard.
Yeah, I haven't shaved my beard in a long, long time. Nice to see you guys.
You too.
And thanks for having us.
No, no
Oh,
problem.
you're welcome.
All right, we're gonna be quiet again.
Okay, so let me direct this.
So you
So I've
don't
got-
need, you can see your image now, right?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you to serial number 30. This machine's going to ship probably sometime next week, I think. So I'm just going to show you a few things first that make the LT150 very different from, oh, I've got to move this a little bit away from my hand crank. Sorry about that. All right, so the first thing you'll notice is the LT150 is turning the cylinder, okay? And the reason the LT150 turns the cylinder is because the cylinder is what drives the ribber. And here is what our ribber looks like. Very similar to the original Tuttle, it's cone-shaped. And these little tangs right here on the outside of the cone, that's what mates with tangs on the inside of the cylinder. Let me go grab one. So our cylinder, the inside of our cylinder has these tangs. And that's when the cylinder's turning, that's what's driving the ribber. Okay. So back to the LT. All right, so because we can rotate our cylinder, we can do something that's called two-feed knitting. Now, is more commonly used in our production machines to get more production, because if you're feeding two ends of yarn, you're making two rows of stitches per revolution. So, but the other cool thing about two-feed knitting is that when you do it, you can introduce horizontal striping, and you can also do patterning. So what I'm doing right now is I'm raising some needles, and the reason I'm raising the needles over here is because I have a set of cams that are hidden on this side of the housing. and the cams are kind of stacked together like puzzle pieces. So they expand in one way and collapse in the other way. And actually I can show you that. So what I'm about to do
Hey, Amy,
is, yes?
somebody asked, can you move the cylinder closer to the center of the screen? I'm not sure exactly.
I'm trying to get it as close as I can without hitting the crank. And I want to be on the right side just because that's where the yarn is coming in. I think my dad's going to try and adjust it. Maybe we'll raise it and tilt it more towards the cylinder. But what I was going to show you is the inside of this housing. The cams are, the 2 feed cams are hidden inside. So I'm going to raise these up and you'll see that the needles go up and down on both sides now. So here's where the regular needles go up, and here is where the second feed would go up. Okay, so that's just to show you how these cams collapse and expand.
That better now?
All right, so maybe try.
Ask him how that is.
It needs to tilt way further down.
Somebody says
Okay.
more like center the machine in the shot so we can see the entire thing. I don't know exactly what they're saying. I think that's maybe a little better. That yeah, you need to tilt it down just a little bit, Andy.
Yeah, down.
Down?
Yeah.
A little
Yeah.
more. There you go.
Yeah, don't worry about seeing Amy. It's the machine.
It's her hand.
Right.
Sorry, Amy.
No, I'm glad. I'd rather not. All right, so now I'm ready to, so I raised half the needles, and what I'm gonna do now is expand these cams, and I know that you can't see it because it's on this side. Too bad I don't have multiple cameras operating at the same time. So now that I have the cams on this side expanded, this needle right here, you're gonna notice it's gonna go up again. And I have to lower the needles that I raised so that they can enter this cam track. And if I don't introduce this yarn soon enough, I will lose the knitting because these needles are now casting off.
Hey, Amy and Andy, one more.
Yes?
Just Andy, rotate to your right just a little bit. Yeah, that's good. Good.
That better?
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now I have a blue end knitting on this side and a white end of yarn knitting on this side. Oftentimes, so this is the new yarn that I just added. I like to feed that into the needle in front of it so that there's not a little gap between those two needles. So now that I've done that, every time I rotate the cylinder, it's making 2 rows of stitches per revolution. And what I'm doing now is I'm adding a latch guard. So we have latch guards pretty much all over the place. I don't know what they're called, if you call them latch guards in the craft knitting world, but that's in the production knitting world, that's what we call them. We basically, what a latch guard does is, I'll grab a needle.
Good.
Sometimes when a
Amy, they're
Yes?
asking if you could zoom in a little closer. The picture's not real crisp, so if you could zoom in a
Okay.
little closer, it might get a.
see, my iPad doesn't actually have Zoom capability, but
Was
Yeah.
it dial up?
No,
yeah, no.
Wi-Fi. How's that?
Yeah, but now.
Now you got the wrong angle.
Yeah, so
To the right.
To your right. Yeah,
There
that's
you go.
probably, yeah.
You were closer.
I'm trying to give your legs more room, okay?
Yeah, that's better.
It's better.
Yep. Yeah, but stop moving.
Yeah, go back, Deb. Go back.
Yeah. Okay, right there. Don't move. Don't move.
Okay, we'll
Okay.
keep it. Of course, hopefully my crank doesn't hit it. Let me check. Yep, it's gonna hit there. Can we
We can rotate this a little.
and then
Okay,
swivel it back?
tell us when we're there. We there now?
Is that,
I think that's pretty good. I mean, the issue is that that's good. If you can do it right there, I think that's pretty
We'll
good.
go on the other side.
the other, yeah, I guess we
Yeah,
could.
that- I
I
mean,
felt
it's
like
fine.
this would be a better angle.
I-
What's that?
It's fine.
Let's try the other side.
Well,
Just leave it, Dad. Just
Okay.
leave
it's
it.
fine. It's fine.
We're
Okay.
boring people.
We'll be quiet. No, it's okay.
Okay, sorry. All right, so now as I'm rotating the crank, it's one end of blue is knitting and one end of white is knitting. On its own, it doesn't really look that impressive because it's just like white and blue stripes. But if you wanted to pattern, you could do, and I'm not very creative, the only thing I can ever think of is checkers. So I'm gonna raise 2 needles over here so they will not knit the white. I'm gonna lower them here. So now they're gonna knit the blue, right? But I'm also gonna raise needles on either side of it. So now I've got these 2 that are only knitting white yarn and these 2 that are only knitting blue yarn. So when I go through a couple revolutions, the pattern kind of starts showing itself. Shoot, I forget which ones So just by raising and lowering needles, I can get a pattern. You just have to make sure that your latches remain open, because if they close while you do it, then it can be pretty frustrating. So that's one way that you can do patterning on the LT150 pretty easily. The other thing that's pretty cool on the LT150 is I can rib while I'm in 2 feed. And that looks really neat when you do 1 by 1. And I'm gonna try to, I'll show you on a sock. So here's the sock that I did a regular 1 by 1 rib in a solid color up here, and then I switched to 2 feed down here with the pink and the green. But because it was 2 feeding and ribbing, the inside has like a almost like a double knit look. So that's pretty cool. That's something I'm pretty sure you can't do on other circular sock knitting machines. So to show you that, basically, we're gonna engage the ribber. So I'm raising it and swiveling it over the center of the cylinder, and I'm gonna drop it. Making sure, so what I'm doing is I'm making sure that these tangs, the driving tangs on the cylinder, are mating with the tangs on the inside of the ribber. Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, all right, good, because I lost a video of you. That's why I was,
See, they're
concerned.
they're controlling the
Yeah,
meeting. They might have muted themselves.
I
oh, no, that's good.
Yeah, you're fine.
I just wanted to make sure. I thought I was talking to myself for a second. All right, so now I'm gonna start engaging some ribber needles. So because we have this cone-shaped ribber, I can use the same needle in the cylinder as I can the ribber. And that makes it really convenient when you're switching from cylinder to ribber, because I don't have to transfer needles on and off the needle. So I'm just sliding it up and twisting it around. You are putting a twist in the stitch, but honestly, I've never made a sock where I thought that twist changed the look of the sock. I've done it both ways, where I've actually taken the stitch off the needle so that there wasn't a twist, and then socks where I left the twist in, and I I don't notice a difference, so I just keep it this way. And this is part of the allure of the machine is the convenience of not having to do that. So I won't bore you. I won't go all the way around. So now here's the needles that are ribbing. So they're grabbing, I gotta adjust on here. What I'm doing is adjusting my ribber needle latch guard. So we have latch guards, like I mentioned, all over the machine. So pretty much anywhere the needle is casting off, there's a little wire that keeps the latch from snapping shut. So the blue yarn is ribbing. Now, when these ribbing needles come back around to where the white yarn is, the white yarn is missing the ribbing needles. And actually, I'm going to tilt this yarn guide just a tad. And that's how you get that double knit effect. So I'm ribbing the blue, and the ribbing needles are basically skipping the white. So it'll be clear what that looks like when I take the ribber back out. Common question that I get is there's this little window right here. This is where you can switch from ribbing to cylinder knitting, and that window is a little small. And people have asked, oh, can that window be larger so that you can switch more needles at a time? And we can't, because there's too much. If we did, we'd get rid of some functional parts of the ribber cam. But it would be great if we could offer that. Another common question I get is, do we offer equal slot ribbers? The reason we cannot offer an equal slot ribber is because of the physical shape, because our ribber is cone shaped, the diameter being larger at the top and smaller at the bottom. The smaller diameter at the bottom just isn't big enough for equal slot, for a large number of slots. If we put more than, I think it's 44 slots in our ribber, the material at the bottom of the ribber will be gone. Actually, it's clearer to see when I show you a ribber cone. So here's a ribber cone, and you can see very clearly that the top, around where the diameter is larger, there's bigger space between each slot. And at the bottom, the space between each slot is much, much closer together. And that's because, the bottom of the cone is a smaller diameter. So if you could imagine, if I had 72 slots in here, all of this would be blown away, and we'd lose the function of the ribber cone. The only way we could do it is if we offered a ribber cone that used a shorter needle, but then we'd kind of lose what makes the LT150 different, is that we can use the same needle in the cylinder as we do the ribber. So right here, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, I think I went too far. That's where we were two feeding and ribbing. So a lot of people, when they first get an LT150, the biggest hurdle is switching between cylinder and ribber. And I'm sorry, cylinder rotation and camshell rotation. That's the biggest, steepest part of the learning curve for our machine. So I'm just going to demonstrate that here. And so the reason we offer that is so that you can make your heel and your toe with the camshell in rotation. Although we do have a few LT150 customers that make their entire sock in cylinder rotation, and that's totally fine too. There is no right or wrong. I'm just gonna take this out. All right, so, oh, and notice that, oops, I went too fast. I dropped a stitch. Always happens when I'm demonstrating. Anyway, so before I show you switching between cylinder and camshell, notice that because I'm rotating my cylinder, I have this white yarn here and it's not twisting with the blue yarn. I'll have to show you our takedown system too. That's a whole other part of the machine that you haven't seen yet. So with it like this, I could do, you know, striping of my own, just by taking, you know, the blue yarn out and putting the white yarn in. Still, you know, I don't have to worry about any yarn twisting. Another patterning feature is, I don't know if you're familiar with plating. That's a term used in a lot of machines that we make for the automotive industry. They like to use a slippery yarn that gets plated on the inside and a more tough yarn that's on the outside. So it's almost like a binary fabric. And so basically, when you're plating, you have two yarns that are feeding in at two different positions. Let me see if I can, bear with me. I'm gonna.
Amy, that's way better.
Oh, okay, good. All right, I guess I'll keep you here then. All right.
Oh, you did? Okay.
All right, so here's the white yarn and here's the blue yarn. And as I crank, you'll notice that one will be more visible on the inside. And that's what's called plating. They just switched, so I probably should adjust this a little bit so that one has to clearly be higher than the other for it to work properly. Okay, there it goes. Okay, so, and it's working harder when I do that because now I'm knitting two ends of yarn at the same time. But a cool thing that you can do, and it's something that I really do have to pay attention when I do it, is if I wanted to do a pattern where, and again, I'm not very creative, but so we'll skip 3 needles and then we'll let it knit 2 needles and we'll skip 3 needles. 1. I got to go a little further. Skip 3, knit 2, and then we'll skip 3. Sorry. It's because the camera is on the side that I like to sit at.
Need help with that, Amy?
No, no, I
Is it
don't.
solid now?
Oh yeah, yeah. All right, I forget the pattern that I was going to do. But anyway, the point is you can introduce yarn, and what happens is you end up with whatever yarn is more prominent is visible on the outside. And if you skip a yarn, then you can do things like, and I've actually done it before, lettering. So the idea is you have both yarns knitting so that you don't have like the gap between the 2 needles that, you know, when you take one yarn out, there might be a gap, but by leaving the blue yarn in, there is no gap, and you end up with a, I'm sure it's not very visible now because we're only seeing the inside, but on the outside you can make some pretty cool patterns. Okay, so that I covered plating, 2-feed knitting, ribbing. Oh, switching between cylinder rotation and camshell rotation. All right, I'm just going to cut one of these yarns. And I'm also going to take this out of the way because I don't need it. So basically, you're seeing me switch between yarn guides. This pretty winged yarn guide is what we use when we're knitting a heel or a toe. And this yarn guide you have to use when you're ribbing. So those are a few things that, you know, are easy to forget when you're first learning. You also notice that the cylinder has a green slot and a blue slot. This is very different, I'm sure, than other circular sock knitting machines. And when I first developed this as a way of knowing when to start and stop your cylinder rotation was, you know, I didn't have any previous knowledge of other circular sock knitting machines. So hopefully the system I came up with is okay. But basically the green needle is the start needle, and the start needle is basically how you line up your ribber and how you know where to start and where your row starts and stops, like if you're going to make a change or something. So what I'm going to do is disengage the cylinder, and I'm going to do it with the green slot on the right. Now, this is the part that you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm reaching from underneath my machine, and I'm pushing up on what's called cylinder pins. And the cylinder pins, what they're gonna do is, so right now the cylinder's turning, right? And that's because this little flipper, I don't know if you can see that, but this flipper is engaged with the drive gear. When I push up on the cylinder pin from underneath the machine, it's flipping that that drive pin out of the drive gear, and that's what keeps the cylinder stationary. And there's two of them. The original Tuttle actually only had one, but we put two on opposite sides, thinking we needed a little bit more stability with the 2-feed knitting. So I'm going to, and oh, so this green also gives me an idea of when I can push up on the cylinder pin. So as this gets to the right, I'm gently pushing up. That first pin is engaged, and now there's another one directly across from it. So now my machine is in neutral, nothing's turning. Now, let me see if I can. Oh. The plunger is not visible, so that's what. All right, well, here's one plunger. Here, I'll move this out of the way. Here's one of the camshell plungers right here, and there's another one in the front, okay? There's two of them. The one in the front is silver, and the one in the back is black. So when I engage my camshell, so I was turning my cylinder in this direction, in what we call the comfortable direction. Now I need to turn in the opposite direction because I'm going to be engaging my camshell. So I'm pushing down on these plungers, and now those are engaging with the drive gear. So now my cylinder stationary, and I am rotating the camshell. What makes the LT150, I think, a little confusing for people is that you can operate the LT150 just like any other machine if you're going to make just a like roll top sock or a hung hem sock. If you're not going to rib and you're not going to do 2 feeding, you can operate the LT150 the same as any other machine. It's when you're going to rib or 2 feed, you want to be rotating your cylinder. And more importantly, so now I'm going to disengage my camshell. So I aligned my plunger with, there's these little knot, I don't know if you can see that little notch right there in this ring. That's so that I can pull this out of a drive gear. So now the camshell is disengaged and so is the cylinder. So now I'm going to pull down on the cylinder pins from underneath. Maybe I'll try and show you those from a different angle. And as I rotate in the comfortable direction, I'm engaging those flippers back into the drive gear. I think now, so I showed you a lot of the different, knitting features, but I haven't shown you a full view of the machine. So I'm gonna try to back this up. Oh, actually, so down here, I was practicing earlier. So these are our heel weights. All right, so as I rotate, as I crank, and I'm turning my cylinder, notice that the knitting is turning as well, okay? In the original Tuttle, basically there would be a hanging weight and it would be swinging around and, knocking everybody's knees, who's ever, operating the machine. We definitely wanted to avoid that. So this is a really cool thing that my dad came up with. Basically, so this strap, there's a idler pulley way at the bottom here, and there's another one on the inside underneath the stand, okay? And that's what's holding the weight. But on the very top, this hook, there's a bearing inside of this collar. Hang that right there. Well, the magic is in this cool roll. Basically, it's a sock storage device, and it's got a one-way clutch in it, so I can turn it in one direction, but it drives in the other. So that's how you can wrap up the material and hang the weight and not have it completely unroll on you. I've found that I can usually only store about 2 socks before this roller gets overloaded, and then I'll either cut and start again. So that's a look at the takedown system. We're gonna look up here. Let's see. So pretty much everything I'm showing you is what the machine comes with. This upper yarn, it's actually not a yarn tray, it's a yarn mast tray. So this upper tray has 3 positions, and the one far on the left that doesn't have a heel spring, that's the one that we typically would use, the waste yarn. And we always have a position for 2 project yarns, and both project yarns have these heel springs. And the way they work is these tension devices, my dad sourced them from a sewing machine company, and basically we wanted to have something that was repeatable. So over here, you'll notice that the knobs on the tension device have numbers, and that's there so that if you make a sock with your tension set at 1, and you take notes on the type of yarn you used, in theory, you should be able to recreate that same tension a year from now. Over here, another neat feature on the LT. Let's see if I can, excuse me while my cameraman is slacking. So, all right. This right here. So here's another terminology thing that I noticed. It's kind of funny. There is no right or wrong, but I noticed very quickly when we started making the LT150 that stitch length and tension are terms that were commonly used with each other. So when someone would say, oh, just increase the tension, I thought they were talking about the tension on the yarn, but they were talking about stitch length. And what I call stitch length is, it's just the industry term in production knitting. It's basically the distance, actually, let's see. Well, it's the distance that the needle at its lowest position. So when the needle goes up, it grabs yarn, and then it comes down and makes a stitch, right? So the stitch length would be the distance between the top of the cylinder and the top of the hook when the needle's at its lowest position. So over here, we have stitch adjustments in increments of 1 to 10. Those numbers actually don't have like an actual measurement. It's just something that you can take note by along with your tension setting when you're making a sock. So if you have a particular yarn that might be thicker than other yarns you use, you might find, well, that yarn knits best at a tension setting of 7. And if you switch to like a very fine lace weight yarn, you might want to adjust your stitch adjustment to 1. 1 being the shortest and 10 being the longest. So I'll make an adjustment right now, and I don't know if you can see the cylinder is raising. Okay, so the higher the number, the higher the needle, the cylinder goes in relation to the needle. So as I lower the cylinder, the distance between the needle and the top of the cylinder shrinks. So that's the shortest stitch adjustment, and this is the longest stitch adjustment. I find when I'm knitting, I like to be in the 4 to 5 range, sometimes 3 actually. Lately I've been trying to make really tight knit socks. The stand comes with the machine. We recently redesigned the stand. I don't think we've shipped 2 LT150s that are identical because we're constantly finding ways to improve the machine. So this upper part of the stand is its own weldment. So I think we improved rigidity, and these bottom legs are all removable for shipping. And so I think it's pretty neat that we made the machine a little bit more portable while improving rigidity, which is kind of hard to do. We also changed the hardware on our stand. So the way the legs go on, every leg is identical, so you can't put it on wrong. There's no front and back and left and right. And the hardware that we use there's backer nuts. So actually you might be able to see it if I lower this. Oh, thanks, Dad. So basically this goes on the back of the leg, and all you need is one tool to put the to assemble the hex bolt to the backer nut. So that's one improvement that we made. Actually, we've made quite a few improvements since the first one. The first 7 or 8 machines, we replaced the camshells because our original design, the cams weren't thick enough. And because of the two feed slots, the needle butts were getting stuck in the slots, but we've increased the thickness of the cams quite a bit so that doesn't happen. I totally forgot. I didn't show you Little Lamb yet. Do I still have time? What time is it?
20th.
You have time.
Okay, great. All right.
Definitely show that. That's
Stretch.
really cool.
And show Andy's,
Amy,
tool caddies too.
Oh, did I?
Amy forgot to mention that the customers that had the thin cams, we replaced all those thin cams with thick cams and no charge. So we decided that that was such an improvement that for the early customers, they deserved that major improvement to the machine.
So the Little Lamb is basically a reducer kit that can be purchased separately. And the kit just drops right on top of the same platform. There's 36 needles, and you can't rib with it, and you cannot tooth feed it with it. So, but the cool thing is, you know, you can make a sock exactly the same way you would on a regular machine. And you can make them real quick too. It's pretty fun. You can use up extra yarn easily, and it's almost like immediate gratification. That's thank you, Dan. That's the word I was looking for. I made 4 of these just this morning. I think it took me under an hour. Of course, I have to sew the toes together, but I have a little nephew on his way, so he'll be getting these. You can even take much thicker yarn and take every other needle out and knit really tiny socks. I wish I had one to show you, but so this is 36 needles. If I take every other needle out, I'll have 18 needles. Notice I'm rotating the cylinder. So when I put the setup on it I can always have the needle in front of me where I prefer to work. When I hang a hem, I always have my cylinder rotating because I can work on it right where I need it. So if I were, you know, to hang a hem and continue with the sock, I would notice I have the green needle. I can take my cylinder out of operation. Now my machine is in neutral. Here's a better look at that front silver plunger. And now I can go ahead and this is a gift from Dave Lord, actually. Thank you. I use it often. All right. So if I'm going to make a heel, I would do it the same way as I would on a larger cylinder. Oh, I forgot. I have it on my waste yarn, so I don't have a heel spring on my waste yarn mast, but you get the idea. Another cool thing is these cylinders and heads are really, really easy to interchange. And I'm going to show you that now as well. First thing I'm going to do, though, I'm taking the weights off so I don't just drop everything. Oh. All right, I'll just put that over there. So what I'm going to do actually is take this entire assembly off. There's just 3 screws. And the regular head goes on the same way. I have to make sure I hold everything because the cylinder is is on its own assembly, but the whole thing lifts off. Now you have a good look at the drive gear. So when I'm engaging my camshell, these are the notches that need to be in line, right? So the plungers that I'm raising and lowering, when I raise them, I take them out of the drive gear, which is why it stays stationary. When I push them down, I'm engaging them with the drive gear. Now these slots, see the pin that's in front of it? This is the cylinder pin. So when I push up on the cylinder pin, it flips the, hold on, let me think. I get this wrong when I try to demonstrate it. When you push up on the cylinder pin, you're flipping the cylinder flipper out of the drive gear. But when you pull down on the cylinder pin, the flipper on the bottom of the cylinder is allowed to engage with the drive gear. This is another this black ring. This is another improvement that we made. We found a better material that we use a green plastic on a lot of our even production machines. It's hard plastic and it's oil impregnated. It's a good wearable material, but we found that this plastic allows the cylinder pins to move up and down a little bit more freely. So that's another way that we have improved the machine. I think, oh, and one other thing, looking back at the LT, I always thought this was pretty cool. If you wanted to change cylinders, because and leave the knitting on your cylinder, you can do that by simply taking some needles out of work. So I'm going to raise some needles. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm trying to get the needle butts above the swing cam. And I'm going to remove my latch guards. Okay. So now the only thing holding the cylinder down is the weight of the cylinder. So I can now just, I'm looking for the tangs on the inside, using them as handles, and the whole cylinder just flips out. And so this is a look at the, when you're making your heel, this is what you'll hear a click. This is the swing, what we call the swing cam. It's going back and forth. And I don't know if it was clear earlier when I showed you the 2-feed cams, when I attempted to show you the 2-feed cams. So when you're engaging 2-feed, these are the cams that stack together like little puzzle pieces. All right, did I forget anything?
Hey, Amy.
You got to tell them about the flip out yarn carrier too. How easy that is.
Yeah, everybody loves this.
Oh, you're talking about the winged yarn guide?
Yep.
Aim it down. There you go.
So this guy right there, yeah. So when you're switching between, if you're going to make a heel or a toe, that you'd be engaging this yarn guide. And then when you're done, you flip it out and just swivel the tall yarn guide.
But Jim once told me that knitters love that because it pulls the yarn away from the needles and the yarn guide away from the needles, So if you have a problem, they can see the needles and
Oh.
adjust the yarn and the latches. Right, Jim?
Yep.
Amy, when you're ready, we've got some questions. Are you ready to?
Sure.
You ready? Okay, give me a
Yeah.
second. Get back to the beginning here.
Nice
Let's
job.
see. You've got all sorts. So
Thanks.
everybody out there that can hear me, if you have questions, chat them over to me and I'll relay them. Let's see.
Nice grease.
Someone says, if anyone says they notice a difference with the twist in that stitch when you switch it to the river, they are way
Yes.
too close to your. They are way too close to your feet.
Wait, say that again.
I said
People
anybody-
notice it.
If anybody notices the twist,
Oh,
they're way too close to your feet.
And this
Gotcha.
would be a social distancing.
Yeah. Let's see. People want to know what the prices and various options are. Either you could tell us now here, or if you want to.
oh no, I don't mind saying.
Okay.
So the machine ranges between like 3,900 and 4,200, depending on the cylinder and ribber combination that you choose. I know that that's, expensive, but we do, everything you saw comes with the machine. And, some of these parts that we make here, they're not easy to machine. We use computer numerical control machines to make all our components. And actually, one thing I didn't mention, a lot of our components are nickel Teflon coated. So I have found a lot of people have said, so I basically drown my machine in oil before I use it. And I thought, really? You do? You don't have to do that with our machine. I pretty much drop in about 10 drops of oil around the cylinder and on the ribber cone. And then after that, I probably only oil my machine like once every 2 weeks maybe, and it's just like a couple drops. If I notice, it's turning a little hard, then I'll add some oil.
We'll show the Teflon nylon crank handle, the gear on the crank handle.
Oh yeah,
I'll see if I can find one.
Okay. We'll keep going
Yeah,
with
one-
questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Somebody asked when you were doing the ribbing right in the very beginning there, was that a 1x1 ribbing? You want to talk about like
Yes.
various? Yeah. Okay. So yes, it was 1x1 ribbing.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So
Okay.
we got one of these machines when we met Andy and Amy, and we're demoing it for people. And I started on it, and my Amy kind of took it over, and it's become her machine now.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. And I commented, it really is that quiet. It is so quiet. Okay, so here's
Awesome.
another question. This is kind of a long one, so hang on.
okay.
Apart from the advantage that the LT150 has in being able to do a double layer of knitting at the same time, and the ability to move needles from the cylinder to the river and back again, what are the other advantages of the LT150 style machines, Tuttle LT150 style machines, compared to conventional machines where the cylinder doesn't rotate? And if this arrangement of CSM and river has strong advantages, why didn't the original Tuttle continue to dominate over the more common styles of 1800s machines? So you've got a question, a history question, and a engineering question.
Okay, the first question I know exactly how to answer. The second one might be a little bit more difficult. So one thing that, and other people might have other things to add to this, but I find that rotating the cylinder has so many advantages. When you're hanging a hem, when you're casting on, when, just the idea of having the yarn path stationary, it takes a lot of variables out of the equation. So if your yarn path is stationary and you're having an issue, you can solve it quicker, because a lot of times, even on our production machines, the problem with if there's a problem in knitting, it usually starts at the cone, and that's the first place I always look. And when your yarn path is stationary, there's less vibration, there's less room for error. So that's having the yarn path stationary, being able to rotate your cylinder and have the work always where you want it, right in front of you. That's other advantages to the cylinder rotating. Now, the other question about the Tuttle, I have a feeling that the Tuttle, similar to the LT150, has a steeper learning curve because you're switching between cylinder and cylinder and camshell rotation. And if that poses a lot of problems for you, then you'd get frustrated a little bit easier. So that could be one thing. The other thing is the original Tuttle, the swing cam was not attached to the camshell, so a lot of them got lost. And the plunger, so our camshell plungers, they can get loose with use, and we have an adjustment for that. The Tuttle may not have had an adjustment for that, and people with Tuttles may know what I'm talking about. So when I say camshell plunger, I'm talking about this guy right here. When you're using the machine and raising and lowering this, it can get loose over time, and there's a way to tighten it very easily with a wrench that we provide with the machine. There's a tiny little button head screw here, and just by tightening it, not even a quarter of a turn will return that to its proper resistance. You can see on the opposite side here, I don't know if you can see that clearly, but there's a little spring clip and a bent, what's that called? Like stressed steel nut right here. So it's bent so that it's bent towards the ID of the housing, and that's what's giving the friction when you raise and lower. Oh, that's good. Thanks, Dad. When you raise and lower the plunger, because when you raise it, you don't want it to fall, because if it falls, then while you're rotating your cylinder, that'll stop the machine.
Okay, Amy, let's
so,
go.
Yeah.
Next question. How long is your wait list?
Right now, we have 6 machines on order, including this one. And when we receive an order, it's usually 12 weeks from the time the order is received to delivery. But unfortunately, right now with the elastic cord material, the high demand for that machine has put us behind on our production for mostly the cylinders and the ribbers. So right now it's more like 14 to 16 weeks. But normally it's 12 to 14 weeks.
Okay. Somebody asked, I know Amy said it should be taken off the stand, but can it be brought on a trip? How portable is it really?
I think that's probably the biggest drawback is the portability. I take it to crank-ins and I take it to fiber festivals, and I can put it together very quickly because I'm used to doing that. I probably take it apart and put it back together in under 20 minutes. But the machine breaks down into 3 main parts. There's the stand, and that weighs about 30 pounds. Then there's the cast iron frame with the crank handle, and that's like another 30 pounds. And then the upper assembly with the ribber, that's probably about 20 pounds. So the weight of it might be the drawback, but I have one customer in mind who takes her machine across the country. So, people who like it enough, they take it with them, and they don't let the weight of it. Oh, hi, Tanya. I know Tanya.
Okay. Somebody said, could you please show the outside of the tube you just knitted?
Yes.
I don't think the little one on the little lamp. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so the knitting is still on the machine, but this area right here, this is where we were 2-feeding and ribbing. And then we were just 2-feeding. That's where that horizontal striping is. And then here's where I said, oh, and you can switch between, make your own stripes. You can switch between blue and white and make thicker stripes. But the pattern, unfortunately, in the plating is way up there. Can you take this off, Dad? And then maybe there'll be another question.
Yeah. Somebody asked, why did you decide to make this machine?
That's a good question. So I'd say about 10 years ago, so I've been working here for a little over 20 years. And excuse me, about 10 years ago, we started getting like one phone call every 6 months asking parts for the Tuttle, or do you still make the Tuttle? Do you sell needles for the Tuttle? And I'd go to my dad and be like, what the heck is the Tuttle? And then, you know, the calls seemed to increase over time. It was real gradual, but honestly, there was a point in our manufacturing where a lot of the equipment we used to make, like that machine I just showed you, we used to make about 100 of those a year. I'd say in the 80s and early 90s. But a lot of the business went to China because a lot of apparel went to China. So luckily we've stayed busy with medical machines. So we're kind of more considered an original equipment manufacturer where we make custom machines. But usually those custom machines are like one at a time. And so anyway, to get back to the question, since the inquiries seem to be increasing and interest was increasing, and since we were feeling a little bit of a void in our business, we thought that would be a good opportunity. You know, why not? Why not give it a try?
Okay.
All right, so this is a nice little segue, since you're talking about from the Tuttle to your machine, that this is
Yep.
Richard Candy's book.
Oh, yep.
Everybody can see that, but it kind of gives a history for everybody from the old machines to the new machines and why they went out and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Somebody asked, how does the row counter work?
Oh yeah, I never even showed that. Our row counter is digital and it's magnetic. So there is, I never even showed it. That's kind of funny.
We're almost to those.
Here, I'll take, yeah, I'll take
Careful,
that.
it'll unravel on
Yeah.
you.
All right, so there's the row counter and you can reset the counter to 0. So basically there's a little magnet inside this shaft assembly. And the magnet is, there's a sensor that's sensing the magnet when it passes. You can actually change the position just with your finger from underneath if you don't like where it's counting the row. If it's not in the right, in the place that you want it, you can easily move, just slide the magnet into the position that you want.
Two more, I think there's just two more questions. If we're in town, do you do shop tours?
Yeah, when someone wants to see a demo of our machine, we make an appointment, and it's always on a Saturday because that's when we're the most quiet and there's less distraction, the phone isn't ringing. And we do the demo right here where I'm sitting. And the shop, what is this, 8,000 square foot?
Yeah.
So we make all our parts in the same open area. So when I take someone out here, we always pass through, you know, our 4-axis milling machine and our NC lathe and the machine that slots. And usually I have parts laid out to, you know, show how, what we have in stock and how we make the parts.
Let's see.
Usually brief, but we do it.
I'm looking through here. Okay, people are saying they couldn't see the book that Jim just held up. We'll hold it.
We'll do it again.
We'll have to when Amy's done, because I have it set so that everybody can just see Amy. So everybody hold on there. Amy, would you ever consider making cylinders and dials for the oldies, please? I assume she's talking about old Tuttles.
We've been asked that in the past, and I think you want to chime in on that one, Dad?
For us, that's a big problem in that we're not sure how those cylinders interchange between a machine that was made 1 year and 3 years later. They didn't have the measurement techniques we have now. So we're afraid of doing that. And even though Jim mentioned earlier, he can do one-offs pretty nicely. We're really not set up for one-offs here. We like to make a standard machine.
Yeah.
That was Dave Lord.
Dave, I'm sorry,
That's
not
it.
Jim, I'm sorry.
We don't make parts. And then last question, and then we'll wrap up here. Do you offer training for your machine?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if someone were to purchase a machine, they basically get a full day of training here. Same place as I do the demos. So right here.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I think I've answered all
Somebody asked
the
about
questions.
trade-ins too.
Oh, yeah. Somebody wanted to know about payment plans and trade-ins.
Payment plans. Okay, so payment plan, we don't have a payment plan, but if someone, and we've done this a few times in the past, if someone wants to place an order and, you know, the price is a little out of their budget, we allow them as much time as they need to pay it until it's ready to ship. So if someone placed an order this year and wanted to make payments for the next year while we, you know, build their machine, that's fine. We just don't ship before full payment is received.
And trade-in.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just not set up.
Trade-in?
Oh, trade-in, we've never done that. I don't think that that's something that we want to get into.
Well, let me know what they want to trade in.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. So, Amy, thank you so much. It was really great.